All right. Welcome, everyone. Um, my name is Mike Hess. I am the Senior Director of Advocacy and Regulatory Affairs at the COPD Foundation. And I am very excited to be joined today by Mary Kielowski. Mary?
Thanks, Mike. I am the president and founder of Running on Air. We are an advocacy organization, and our focus is on supplemental oxygen. And as you can see, or maybe see, I am a supplemental oxygen user.
Yeah, so thank you, Mary. Mary has done a great job today. As hopefully you all are aware, or maybe you're watching the recording here, we are going to be doing a call to Congress campaign for World Oxygen Day on October 2nd. We have legislation pending in both chambers of Congress to improve how we deliver supplemental oxygen therapy to folks like Mary and perhaps folks like you or someone you care about. And this webinar is designed to help kind of give some context about why we're doing this, why we need the SOAR Act, and then also how you can contribute to that. So Mary, why don't you go ahead and get us started with some of these slides in the presentation today.
Great. And so some of you may have noticed Mike's audio is the volume's going up and down a little bit. So um, yeah, so I might end up doing a lot of the talking here. But well, thank you everybody for joining us today. There's been a big effort to get these bills introduced into Congress. One was introduced in February in the Senate, one was in March. The House one was introduced in March. And there has been a lot of visits to Capitol Hill to try to get this passed this session of Congress. And we're kind of getting down to the wire on that. So that's with World Oxygen Day coming on October 2nd, we thought this would be a great opportunity to just flood Congress with phone calls. That's our goal. So for those of you who have never heard of the Supplemental Oxygen Access Reform Bill or Act, I'm going to start off talking a little bit about liquid oxygen. So there's different types, modalities of oxygen. And if you're on supplemental oxygen, you most likely have a home or stationary compressor, and that generates oxygen out of the air, the surrounding air, and it concentrates it. You probably have a tank, and a lot of people will get an e-tank as a backup. And so the tanks have compressed gas. What has been disappearing is liquid oxygen. And liquid oxygen is the preferred modality for people that have higher flow needs. And that's typically 4 liters or more. 4 liters per minute or more. So the benefits of liquid oxygen are kind of displayed in this graphic. So liquid oxygen tends to be lighter than compressed gas, and it tends to last longer. So this graphic is comparing liquid on the left. You can see the e-tank on the right. The liquid, so these two devices give the same amount of oxygen so the same amount of time and the same liter flow. Yet you can see the liquid oxygen is 1/3 less of the weight of the e-tank. And those of us on oxygen, we know that every ounce, let alone every pound, counts. The less you have to drag around and carry with you, the better. So why is this happening? Well, we're blaming it all on competitive bidding. So around 2013, and Mike, do you want you know this a little better, so
Sure. And hopefully my audio will.
sorry.
No, that's fine. Hopefully my audio will stick with this because this is a really important topic. As Mary said, we're kind of attributing a lot of this to competitive bidding. But unfortunately, this was really kind of the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak, because we've really been chipping away at how we pay for medical equipment, particularly oxygen, for the better part of 40 years now, because we just keep, there's a lot of assumptions and well-meaning intent here, but we really have more like chiseled away a lot of how we pay for a lot of the reimbursement. And that's led to a lot of the access issues we have today. And so, kind of where this really picked up speed was about 10 years ago, where the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, which handle all, as it says, Medicare and Medicaid all across the country, decided to put in a new payment policy where they would have oxygen companies in different regions bid on what it would cost them to deliver and service oxygen equipment. And as you might expect, the lowest bidder would win, and that would set the prevailing rate for most of the general area. So you may have big companies that can, have a little bit more efficiency. They kind of edged out a lot of the smaller companies, and so we saw a lot of consolidation where smaller companies went out of business or were acquired by the larger ones. And then again, particularly in rural areas, you might see a large area of a county or a region that's serviced only by one supplier. So there's no more competition or anything like that. And in addition to that, there are also some complexities around Medicare where people, when you get an oxygen device, you are locked into a 5-year contract with that. But only 3 years of that are actually paid for by Medicare. It's a really odd way of doing things, but the bottom line is a lot of companies were really losing money, and so they had to deliver the cheapest form of oxygen that they could, and to keep their own costs down. And in many cases, for portable systems, that's compressed gas, the tanks that we've been talking about. In some cases, that's a portable concentrator, that sort of thing. But really, it has become it has become whatever is best for the company rather than what's best for the person, the beneficiary. And then, since a lot of insurance companies kind of follow along with what Medicare does, they've adopted those policies for their own as well. And to kind of highlight what the map that Mary just had up there, again, 10 years ago, there were 43,000 Medicare beneficiaries receiving liquid oxygen, and that had already been on the decline because of, again, the other cuts that we had made. And so over the course now of 8 years, now we're down to around 3,500, and there are fewer and fewer by the day.
And I also just want to throw out, Mike mentioned the types of oxygen that make you more mobile. And so some people might say, well, there's portable oxygen concentrators. However, portable concentrators don't meet those high flow needs. And that's a whole nother discussion. Mike and I did a webinar on that almost a year ago, a little over a year ago. So yeah, so they, the best modality is the liquid oxygen for people with those high flow needs. So we had these bills introduced in Congress. And so you might ask, well, what do those bills do? How would they improve the situation? So there's 4 basic pillars of for the bills. The first is to ensure that supplemental oxygen becomes patient-centric. A lot of companies have kind of taken on that it's home oxygen. So as long as they keep you alive in your house, they're meeting their obligation. But this is to turn it into supplemental oxygen to ensure people requiring oxygen can live full lives outside of their primary residence. And it creates a patient bill of rights to keep oxygen patient focused on the patient needs. The second one addresses the liquid oxygen to ensure access to liquid oxygen for patients for whom it is medically necessary. And part of that will be paying a little extra based on if liquid oxygen is needed. And that would have to be in the prescription. It won't be just a choice to call up and say, hey, deliver me liquid oxygen. That has to be deemed medically necessary.
And one thing I'll throw out there also, Mary, is again, liquid oxygen can be quite expensive to service. It's basically if you think back to maybe high school chemistry or something like that, if you take a gas and make it very cold and under a lot of pressure, it will turn into a liquid. And so basically what a lot of this liquid oxygen is a very high-tech thermos bottle. But in order to transport that, because it's under such high pressure and cold conditions and everything else, you need special delivery truck certification, special driver certification. So it is expensive, which is why it was one of the first portable things to go, because it was so expensive, and also why it's not going to necessarily be practical to bring it back for everyone.
Right. And, the other thing is you have a reservoir in your house. So you have that little tank on the previous graphic. You refill that on top of the reservoir. And then the company fills the reservoir every week or 2 weeks. Liquid oxygen does evaporate. So, you can't keep the reservoir, for a month or so without some of that evaporating. Thanks, Mike. Okay, the third one is to create a statutory service element to provide reimbursement for respiratory therapists. So most of us who got our oxygen delivered had little to no training on how to use it. And that training typically came from the delivery driver. And, there are some delivery drivers that are very knowledgeable, but they are also on a schedule of making deliveries. So if they have a new person they're delivering to, they might not have the time to really sit with them and answer their questions and to make sure they know how to use the systems. So this gives access not just when it's delivered, but at other times to the expertise of a respiratory therapist. And then the last one is just to make this universal to reduce fraud and abuse, which was one of the things people thought was happening previously when this got put into competitive bidding. So having a standardized way of writing the prescriptions so that it makes it easier for the prescriptions to be approved and for people to get the type of oxygen that works best for them. So what are we asking you to do? Basically, we're asking you to call your 3 members of Congress next Wednesday. That's October 2nd, which is World Oxygen Day. And as I said at the beginning, we really want to flood Congress with calls. We know that they're out of session, or will most likely be out of session at the time, but there will be people answering the phones, or should be, and you can always leave a message. Now, I put up a link here that Mike, maybe you can put that in the chat. But this webinar is being recorded. We are planning on sending out the link to the recording pretty darn soon, in the next day or two, because we want other people to see this in time to call next Wednesday, and we'll include that link in that email also. So we're asking you to ask your 3 members of Congress. And again, you can go to that link. If you want to click on it now to see, you can put in what it does is it brings up, you can put in your address and it'll bring up your members. And we're asking you to ask them to co-sponsor the Supplemental Oxygen Access Reform SOAR bill. And we will give you those bill numbers so that you can specifically put that in your, let them know that when you call. We're asking you to be prepared before Wednesday, and make a plan for calling. And we'll go over that in a moment. We're going to ask that if you have one or more members in a key committee, and ask your friends and family to call. We want to flood Congress with these phone calls. So obviously, the more people we have calling, the better. And you don't need to be on supplemental oxygen, for you to support the bill, for you to call. So what are the three committees and why are they important? So bills get introduced into a committee. And, if you've watched the news, you might have heard, such and such bill failed to, move out of committee, or, that sort of thing. So the committees decide what bills come up for vote. And if these committees don't move the bill forward, it's not going to get voted on this session. So there's two key committees in the House. There's the Ways and Means and Energy and Commerce. And in the Senate, there's just the Finance Committee. So I just want to say, whether you have somebody on one of these committees or not, we still want you to call. We want as many people to co-sponsor the bill as possible. But if you do have somebody on these committees, we're going to ask that you kind of add a little extra language to your call. Mike, did you want to say something?
No, I was just going to throw that in there because,
Okay.
As we're getting down to crunch time, we not only need co-sponsors, but we actually need to put pressure, as much pressure as we possibly can, on the leaders of these committees to actually, hold their committee votes and things like that, because we are, running out of time. And there, as I understand it, there's a big event coming up in November that's probably going to be addressing a lot of Congress's time and attention. So we really want to do whatever we can to kind of keep some focus on this and try to keep things moving along as much as possible.
Yeah, definitely. And we're not asking you guys to call all of these committee members. I just want to be clear on that. We only want you calling your members of Congress because, to be honest, the committee members probably don't care about your call if you're not one of their constituents. If you don't live in their state or their district, they'll probably end the call with you very quickly. All right, so for the next part, it was just easier to say what states do not have a senator or House member in the key committee. So if you're from Alaska, Arkansas, Hawaii, Maine, Mississippi, Nevada, New Mexico, or Vermont, you can kind of zone out during the next few slides if you'd like.
However, remember that it's still really important to contact your two senators and your representative to at least get them to co-sponsor.
And we are going to talk about that, but I just wanted everybody to see if they might have somebody in a key state. Okay, so I'll give everybody a moment to look at this. I'm not going to read every state or every senator's name here. If your state is on here, you are calling that senator. That person is your senator. We all have two, but there's only one senator per state in the Finance Committee. Now, I will point out we have two that have asterisks by their names: Bill Cassidy in Louisiana and Mark Warner in Virginia.
And
Bill Cassidy in Louisiana is the senator who introduced this bill for us.
And it looks like we picked up Marsha Blackburn along the way too.
Oh, yes, thank you. Sorry. yeah, the last part of her name's blocked. I heard, on my computer. Sorry about that. Um, Mark Warner was one of the initial co-sponsors, and yes, Marsha Blackburn has uh, has joined as a co-sponsor. Okay. And if you didn't find your state on here, or yet, or if you need more time, uh, this information is available on Running on Air's website. So we'll share that link also when we send out the email. All right, there's a lot more names on the House side, and there's multiple. So you may not be sure if the name, so let's say if you're from California, you may not be sure if any of those are your representative or congressperson. But again, we've got these on Running on Air's website. That'll make it a little easier for you to check if you can't find it right now. But just give you a moment again to look through this. And
And
again, I'm sorry, go ahead, Mike.
also, generally speaking, the committees that your representative is on will be also listed on the website. So if you're going to that Find Your Member website, you go to their page, and it should have all of their committees on there. And so you really have to look for I think it was Ways and Means and Energy and Commerce. And then that's how you know that those are the key people. And then again, this is all going to be accessible through a recording. And so if you need to stop back and take another look and figure that out, that's fine too.
And again, we've got I think just two people with asterisks. So Larry Bouchon, which was one of the initial co-sponsors of the bill, and then Darren Soto has joined on too as a co-sponsor. Did I miss anybody, Mike? Oh, you're on mute.
Man, it's an audio day. No, it looks like you got everybody.
Okay. So I've been saying we're asking you to ask them to co-sponsor. Mike and I have been saying co-sponsor. So I just want to make sure everybody's clear, co-sponsor versus support. Because you hear so and so supported the bill, or you might, I would typically say, hey, when a supplemental oxygen bill comes out, would you support it? There's a difference in what that means, though, and this is why we're asking you to ask them to co-sponsor. So if you ask them to support the bill, it means if it comes up for that general vote, you're asking them to vote for it. If they co-sponsor the bill, that means that they will add their name to the list of co-sponsors. And that's showing everyone that they are behind the bill now. You can go to that congress.com or .gov rather website, and it gives you a list of everybody who has co-sponsored. So I will say somebody was added today. We actually have 25 House co-sponsors now, and 4 senators that are co-sponsors. So how do I prioritize the 3 calls? This may sound like a lot. We're trying to simplify it as much as possible for you. So if you just bear with us, you might be saying, what is this with these committees and, knowing this and knowing that. So just asking you guys to hang with us. So how do you prioritize the 3 calls? Your first priority is if you have a House member on a key committee that has not co-sponsored the bill yet. So again, they're on a key committee, but they have not co-sponsored the bill. And you saw there were only 2 people on that list that had co-sponsored so far. The second is if you have a senator that is on the key committee that is not co-sponsored the bill yet. The third is a representative that is not on the key committee, has not co-sponsored the bill. Same with the senator as the fourth priority. Not on the key committee, has not sponsored the bill. And then the last two are, the fifth one. If you have a representative or senator on a key committee that has co-sponsored the bill. And the last one, if you have a representative or a senator not on the key committee that has co-sponsored the bill.
And those last two, if they've already co-sponsored it, those are basically thank you calls. And I believe we have some scripts coming up that can kind of go through that too. But again, just a key point is it's really important to follow up and say thank you, because then, that helps future projects like this.
Right. And we have a little, again, if they're on a key committee, even though we're saying thank you, we're going to ask them to talk to the leadership of the committee to push this through. So what we've put together for you, hopefully to make this easier, is conversations based on those priorities. So a lot of these are going to read almost the same. And let's move this little thing out of my way so I can see the whole thing. Okay. So again, first priority is a House member on a key committee that has not co-sponsored the bill yet. I'm not going to read all these conversations to you, but I'm going to read this one. So you say, you call up and, you're having a conversation with them, right? Now, I'll let you know, particularly in the House, they may ask you for your address because they may want to make sure that you are a constituent before they go through having this conversation with you. The Senate side may do that also. But even if you call up like we have here, so if I say, hi, my name is Mary Kitlowski, and I'm a constituent of Representative and mine, he's not on a key committee, but Rupersberger, who I would just like to give a shout out to because he co-sponsored the bill last week. So I will say calling and pressuring, nagging does work. So they may stop you there and just say, okay, what is your address? We just want to make sure. So don't let that throw you. And then you can just say, I'm calling because it's today is World Oxygen Day. And I'm asking Representative Rupersberger to co-sponsor the Supplemental Oxygen Access Reform Bill. And we've got the number in there for you. It's HR 7829. And to ask him, to ask the committee leadership to review the bill this session. So that's the additional language that we're asking them to co-sponsor and to ask the committee leadership to pass the bill this session. And then the next line is, this bill is important to me. Now, we're putting, this is sort of the World Oxygen Day Mike Hess statement. Because while everybody needs oxygen, some bodies need a little more. And then we're asking you to share your story. Or, if you're not on supplemental oxygen, you can share why you're supporting this. Maybe you have a family member or had a family member or have a friend, or maybe you just feel like everybody should be allowed to breathe easily. Whatever your reason, you can share that at this point. But making it personal is important. If you're on oxygen and you have a story to share. So a lot of these read very similarly, but it's just, again, tailored. So the second one down here for the senator, it's the same, but instead of saying representative, you're saying senator. It has a different bill number. So again, we were just trying to make these conversations easier for you. One thing I do want to just mention with these two, and I don't want to freak people out. If this is your first time calling, feel free to ignore that this little, oh, I can't highlight it here, but at the end of the first paragraph in those brackets, I'd also like to schedule a meeting at the local office to discuss the importance of this bill. That is totally up to you. If they are on a key committee, that could be helpful, but just you calling is enough. So again, if you are new to this, don't worry about that unless you would really like to meet with somebody. If you've been to multiple Hill days and you've been calling every day since the bill was introduced, feel free to ask about scheduling those meetings.
Yeah, the absolute most important thing to do is to call and and get on the record that a constituent called and asked for support for this bill. Anything else is icing on the cake. And so if this is, as Mary said, if this is your first time, remember these are staffers. These aren't like ogres or anything like that. They're regular people too, and that's their job is to take calls from constituents. And from what I understand, actually, a lot of times these are kind of a little bit refreshing because they get a lot of complaints and they get a lot of other things. And this is a pretty straightforward ask. So it should generally, in my experience, it's always been pretty well received. And I've heard very, very, very few stories of any kind of pushback or anything like that. So this is also a good way to get your feet wet a little bit in the world of advocacy, because we always need more people for to tell these stories and to make these calls and everything else.
All right, so we've got 3 more slides of the conversations. Again, I'm not going to read every single one of them. These are based on those priorities we mentioned. You're going to get a copy of this. So you'll know, you can kind of go through and pick the conversations that apply to your situation.
And for folks who are catching a recording of this, we'll make sure that there's a link to a Dropbox or a shared file that has a copy of this too, so that you can access it and put it into your plan.
Yeah. And we do have these conversations on Running on Air's World Oxygen Day page too. So you've got a lot of different places that you can go to for this. Okay. So when are we asking you to call? We're asking everyone to call on Wednesday, October 2nd. And just for the fun of it, thought it would be, calling at 10:02, right? We're calling on 10:02 the day. Call at 10:02 the time in your time zone, if possible. Or if you can't, maybe try calling at 10:02 a.m. Washington, D.C. time, Eastern time. But if you're not able to call then, and if everybody's calling then, you may not get through. Just calling on next Wednesday is great. I mean, that's what we're looking for, is just people to call next Wednesday. If you're not able to call next Wednesday, maybe you've got a day full of meetings, maybe you have the type of job.
Doctor's appointments.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe you've got the type of job where you can't, get away for a few minutes. If you can call on the 1st or the 3rd, that would be great too. So you can modify the suggested conversations, to apply. So if you're calling on the 1st, tomorrow is World Oxygen Day. If you're calling after, you can say yesterday was World Oxygen Day. So we're asking everybody to make a plan and be prepared. This is we probably all know this is the best way to make sure things get done. So when are you going to call? Go ahead and set aside 15 to 20 minutes to make all 3 calls. I mean, maybe even you just want to set aside 30 minutes. I don't think it'll take that long because, unless the staffer is really having a slow day, they're not going to want to talk to you for more than a couple of minutes anyway, most likely. But set aside that time. Maybe it's, when the kids go off to school, or maybe it's during my lunch break, or maybe it's when I get home from work. Between 3 and 3:30, I'll set aside time. Whatever works best for you. Or maybe what works best for you is to set aside 3 different blocks. Maybe 15, 20, 30 minutes just seems like too much time to set aside. If you set aside 5 or 10 minutes 3 times during the day, even if you decide, okay, look, I could do just 10 minutes. I'll call one person on October 1st. I'll call one person on October 2nd. I'll call one person October 3rd. Whatever works best for you. Um, and then just have a backup time to call in case you get a recording. I'm going to throw my Senator Van Hollen under the bus. I feel like, they is one of these companies who never answers the phone. I always get a recording. I never get a hold of a person when I call. Um, so if you get a recording and you want to try calling back, but definitely leave a message if you get a recording, just so they know that you called. But again, time can get away from us. A meeting came up during the block you had set. So if you have a backup time, that'll help you, you know, do that. And again, maybe on October 2nd, at the end of the day, you're like, shoot, I totally forgot to call. So just call on the 3rd. Make a plan for the 3rd. So part of the plan and being prepared is to know who you're calling. So ahead of time, we recommend that you have the names and phone numbers of your 2 senators and your 1 representative, that you know if they're on one of those key committees, and that you have your list prioritized. So, and that you know which conversation you're having with each one of them. That'll just make it a little easier for you if you go unprepared like that. Um, Sorry, just go back for a second. And part of the reason for asking you to prioritize the calls is, even if you only make one, if you happen to have a representative or senator on the key committee, and that's who you call first, and that's the only call you make, that's great. So after you call, we're asking you to post on social media to let everybody know. Um, so it, and this is hopefully to amplify this and to get more people to call. And so I would also ask, even before October 2nd, Running on Air is posting about this every day. If you can share some of those posts, to encourage and let your friends and family know why it's important to you if you ask them to call. But again, the more people we have calling, the better. So at 8 a.m., we're going to post this graphic on Running on Air's social media pages. We're going to have the information in there, the link for other people, for that congress.gov to check on their senators and everything. It won't be as detailed as what you're getting in this webinar here. We're just going to give them the basics to make calls. So essentially, you would only just have to share it. But you're welcome to copy the graphic, put in your own language if you want to make your own comment. We're asking, in addition, that you tag us so that we know, and can thank you. That you tag your members if you know how to do that. And sometimes it's hard to find what the members' tags are. So if that's a little overwhelming, don't worry about that. And just ask that you also use these 2 hashtags, World Oxygen Day, SOAR Bill 02.
Yeah, and I'll point out that we're not asking you to tag us because we want glory or credit or anything like that. It makes it a lot easier to track, for one thing, exactly how many people we are able to reach. And then when we go out there, we can say, well, we had, 5,000 people tweet about this or post about it or what have you. That again just kind of gives it a little bit more weight. And then also, it's maybe you've heard of uh, this thing called the algorithm that kind of oversees a lot of what you see in social media. The more interactions a tag or a hashtag or anything like that gets, the more likely it is that it will be put in front of people who aren't directly connected with it. So if we can get these things trending, that's how stuff goes viral, as they say. So that's why it's really important to do that, not because we're not because we're selfish or anything like that. It's just because that we want to make sure that this is getting in front of absolutely as many people as it possibly can.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So again, I know we were throwing a lot at you, and it may sound like we're asking for a lot. So what's most important out of everything we've asked? Just calling your highest priority member of Congress. Second, calling all three of your members of Congress. The third is calling on World Oxygen Day. The fourth is calling um, either the first or the third if you're not able to call on the second. The fifth is just calling. If you're going to be on vacation next week or out of the country next week, call tomorrow. We're asking that, so number 6 is just sharing before October 2nd, asking your friends and family to call, posting on social media. So that's, you can do that before the call, but the graphic we just had, sharing that after you make the call, scheduling a meeting with your key committee members, if you feel up to that, or just scheduling a meeting, whether they're a key committee member or not. But the first priority is if you just make that one call to your highest priority member of Congress.
Yeah, and again, this all sounds very complicated. When we drill down into it, it arguably is, but at the core of it is really just getting on record, getting the staffer to mark down that a constituent called about this, and because you might be the person that puts it over the edge. Maybe they have maybe in their own mind the congressperson has said, well, if I get 15 people to call on this topic, then I'll be a co-sponsor, or I'll bring it up to the committee chair. And you might be the 15th or 16th person that gets it, and you might be the voice with your 5 minutes of a phone call. You might make a big difference in public health and in your life or the life of someone you know and care about. And that's really all it takes. It's a very easy way. Again, remembering back to my early advocacy days, I know it can seem intimidating until you try it, but it is honestly a very easy way to potentially make a huge difference in the future of healthcare.
And one of the things I want to throw out too is you don't know who you might be influencing by sharing. So I found out that there's a House member that co-sponsored a few months ago because somebody I know who works on his staff saw my Facebook posts, saw my posts about the bill. I found out about this because when I saw him at an event, I went over and said, "Hey, when would you please tell Congressman ABC that just thank you for being a co-sponsor?" And he said, "That was me." "What do you mean?" And he said, "I saw your post." So you never know who you might be influencing by sharing. Great.
And again, because I know this was a lot of information, I put Mary's email address, my email address in the chat, and we'll make sure that, so if you have any questions after the fact here, please feel free to contact either of us. We're more than willing to help as best we can to get you connected with materials, to remind you about talking points, to answer any questions, to reassure you that this is not as intimidating as it might seem. Whatever it is, we want you to be successful because your success is everyone's success. So please don't hesitate to reach out.
All right. Thank you.
All right.
Thanks everybody for joining.
Thank you. And we'll see you on World Oxygen Day.